Right. So,
welcome to the start of Wellbeing Week. Cue massive applause and enthusiasm across the virtual airwaves. This is a really exciting week, a really exciting opportunity for us to connect everybody. This is the first of many sessions, and we are thrilled, honoured, excited to be getting the ball rolling. We are going to be doing a chat, so Lizzie and I are going to be talking to you about respecting the work style, which may be a new terminology to you, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail. Thank you very much for taking the time to tune in. We shall be no more than an hour. We're going to talk to you for a bit, and then we're going to have hopefully some Q&As and discussion and stuff at the end, with plenty of time to do so, all being well.
And Ali Carter, can I ask that you go on mute because we've got a bit of echo from you? Fab.
If that doesn't sound like what you're expecting, you're probably in the wrong meeting room.
We are talking about respect the work style, which is probably our favourite topic, and underpins everything Alex and I have been doing for the last 5 years. So we're just going to start there with a little bit of context in terms of Alex and my personal backgrounds as to why we care so much about this particularly, and also why we're relatively qualified to talk to you about it.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, so before starting Hoxby, I was working really, really long hours, justifying those long hours as basically I couldn't do any more, I couldn't give any more to my work, and that was therefore all that anyone could ask of me. And that ultimately led to burnout. I realized that I'd been kind of appraising my the quality of my work on the amount of time I was spending doing it, rather than necessarily what I was delivering. And you know, unfortunately, you can keep adding more and more and more to that until eventually you get to a point where you just can't do anymore, and you have to stop. So that's kind of where I got to. And the thing that I realized is that I needed to change the way I thought about work. So at a total level, stop thinking about it in terms of hours spent, and start thinking about it in terms of what's been delivered, and let the kind of where and when that gets done be more of a flexible feast. That's what got me to a conversation with Lizzie, which we'll come on to in a little while. But really, that's my story, really. Just kind of the realization that to have a positive relationship with work for me meant thinking in terms of output rather than time.
So my story is a bit different. So Alex is obviously around mental health, whereas mine is around family. So 5 years ago, I had my first child, and I had basically lived in a dream world where I thought we lived in a world of equality. Up until then, my husband and I were pretty much equal in our careers. And then I had my son, and suddenly it kind of opened my eyes to the pretty pervasive inequalities that there are at work. And I started working part-time. And what I found was I felt like I was always missing out on the most important conversations and the most important things that were happening in the office. And I also felt that I was considered not to be as ambitious in my career because I had a family, which absolutely wasn't true. And I started meeting more and more parents, particularly mums, who were dropping out of the workforce altogether or compromising their careers because they couldn't work in the way that best suited them to work around a family. And it opened my eyes to actually a lot of people being excluded from the workforce because they couldn't work in the way that best suited them. And it just doesn't make any sense for the individual. It also doesn't make any sense for the working community or for businesses, because actually there's some exceptional talent with loads to give that's basically being overlooked because people can't choose where and when they work. So that led to a conversation with Alex in the pub. And that that led to us co-founding a virtual remote working community called Hoxby, and we've been doing that for the last 5 years. In fact, it was our 5th birthday last week. That was very exciting.
Well, it was. And the kind of central idea behind creating Hoxby as a business was to create a new type of work environment, a new operating model that gave everybody the freedom to choose when and where they worked, and almost the right to be judged by their output, not necessarily their input. We felt that this was something that could bring a greater equality to the workplace, to Lizzie's point. It's more of a level playing field, and hopefully will open the door to more work opportunities for more people who have been excluded from work due to the very rigid nature of the 9 to 5 Monday to Friday structure. And that's really where we started, and that's where we've grown from. And the Hoxby community now is at around about 1,000 people across 40 countries. And as I say, we're about 5 years old. So that's kind of our history, I guess. And we've been working remotely ever since. And hopefully the thing that is most relevant now in the context of where we are with coronavirus and everybody being put into a situation where they have to work from home is, how can we help, I guess, others benefit from the learnings that we've had over the 5 years. And really the fundamental thing, which is something that we started on day one, was the idea of work style is actually incredibly important to the ability for an organization and for individuals to thrive through a kind of entirely remote operating model. So we came up with the word work style because it didn't exist as a concept when we started Hoxby. And we think it's increasingly relevant and very relevant in the current circumstances to enabling this way of working to work really well. So we think work style can be the new norm long term. That's our ambition, to replace the 9 to 5 with work style. But firstly, we'll talk about what we actually mean when we say the word work style. Believe it or not, it's not a fashion choice.
So it's not the style of what you work in. So a bit of geeking out to begin with. So the 9 to 5, 8-hour working day was first conceived of more than 200 years ago in the industrial age. We now live in the digital age, and yet most people are still working in that 8-hour working day, which seems madness. So work style is really a call to arms to facilitate people setting their own ways of working, including location and time. So we talk about it as the completely self-determined way in which a person works, including location and time. Suspend disbelief about coronavirus for a moment, because we'll come back to that, but that is the principle of work style. And so basically what we're saying is, just in the same way that people have the freedom to choose their own lifestyle, we believe people should have the complete freedom to choose their own work style. And also what comes with that is being judged on their output rather than where and when they work. So there's a lot of presenteeism before everyone moved to working from home at the moment, or remote working, where people are judged on how much time they spend at the office, how much time they're sitting in their chair, when actually it should be a meritocratic way of working where people are judged on their output. So it doesn't matter how you engage in work, it doesn't matter what hours you work. What matters is the output that you deliver, and that means working in the way that best suits you as an individual.
We found when a lot of people came to Hoxby in the very early days that there was almost a nervousness to talk about the fact that they work an atypical number of hours or days in the week. People were almost hiding when they were actually working in favor of appearing to be working 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. And that is exactly why we think the word work style is so important, because it changes the behavior from one of being almost ashamed of working flexibly to proud and open about working to a certain work style that fits around your particular lifestyle. And if everybody adopts the same attitude to working time and location, then it can be a great leveler and actually a great basis for collaboration, to be really open about when you are and aren't working. We'll come on to talk about that in a little bit more detail shortly.
So we've been living this in practice, and it's been brilliant. We've been doing this for 5 years, and one of the things that we've been trying to do is persuade people that this is the future. And what we're saying now is that suddenly with coronavirus, the world has had remote working thrust upon them. So the conversation has slightly changed, because previously we've been trying to coax people into this and see that this can be really good for individuals, really good for society, and also really good for business. But in practice now, what we're seeing is everyone's remote working. And so actually people need to start thinking about work style in order to make that both healthy from a mental and physical perspective, but also sustainable, because this looks like this isn't going to go away quickly, and we need to get into good habits that we can uphold for the next certainly few weeks, if not a few months. And that means thinking now about work style and continuing to revisit work style over the coming weeks in order to make sure that it's still the best way of doing it.
The rules of the game have changed enormously with coronavirus, and certainly work style doesn't have the kind of freedom and autonomy that we intend it to have for the long term. Certainly for working parents like Lizzie and I, having the children at home now around where we're living and working every day is a new level of challenge and a new challenge for work style. But the principle being still that we need to think consciously about what our work style is, all the more so now, because we have really competing priorities and pressures on our time within the confines of our own home. And so we think that work style can come to our aid in being able to kind of manage the relationships that we hold in our houses as much as the ones that we hold remotely with our colleagues. So there is definitely a whole new level of challenge right now with the kind of being kind of fixed and confined to our homes in being able to execute work style.
Essentially, the principle of work style is you can choose where you work and when you work with complete freedom and be judged on your output. Whereas with coronavirus, if you have children or caring responsibilities, you probably can't choose freely when you work. And also, you certainly can't choose where you work, because essentially you have to be in your home environment. So it is a slightly different context, but the principles still apply. And I think more than ever, there's a requirement to revisit your work style consistently. And I think it's, Alex and I, who've been working completely flexibly in our own work style, being our own bosses for the last 5 years, even for us, we found it challenging. That we've spent the last 2 weeks, we've both been working completely remotely, completely in our homes, with our families at home for the last 2 weeks. And we found that more than usual, we're having to kind of discuss it with each other, discuss it with our partners, and change every day or 2 days to try and make it work. Whereas previously, we would revisit our work style periodically every kind of 6 months or so, but we wouldn't have to revisit it all the time. And essentially, it's because we're finding a new way to survive. It is just you, Sophie. I'd suggest you rejoin.
Yeah, turn it off and turn it back on again. It's the #1 tip for all IT issues. Right, so I'm just going to share a slide now, if I may, if you'll indulge us for a moment. This is kind of the main element of today's call, and our presentation, you'll be pleased to know, is restricted to this one slide. So I'm just going to hit present. Hopefully you can see that. Shout if you can't. So
there are some actions that go with it, aren't there, Alex?
There are. We'll talk through the top line now with the actions. Lizzie, I can't see you, so I'm just going to hope you're doing
okay, that's fine. I will do.
So when it comes to respect the work style, you need to set, project, and respect your work style. We'll come back and refamiliarize you with those actions in due course. But first, let's just go through what we mean by each one. Lizzie, do you want to start with set?
Yeah, so setting a work style can be, in normal circumstances, a very liberating experience, because essentially you're starting with a blank sheet of paper and you are giving yourself the chance to just reconsider the way that you like to work and the way that you work most productively. And as life changes, so you can change your work style too.
So a really great place to start with this is to draw what I would draw a grid of 7 days and 24 hours. So 7 days across the top, 24 hours down the side. And treat that as the blank piece of paper in terms of time. And I guess in the context of this, particularly during the coronavirus, but even, you know, before, so put the things on there that are critical life things that you just can't move on or don't want to move on. So it could be about the movements of your family members. It could be about doing something for you personally, but the things that happen in life that you want to put first.
So those things might include examples of that might be family, it might be exercise, it might be sleep. You know, it's really important to get enough sleep. Basically anything that might stress you out, put those things on your 7 days a week, 24 hours a day first, and particularly get in the mindset that all days are created equal now. So it really doesn't matter whether it's a weekend or not. You can work when it suits you best. So mapping those elements all onto your grid, as Alex says, is really important. The other thing to consider is, when are you at your most productive? So we're all different. We've all roughly got the same circadian rhythm, but we work with quite a few creative types who love to work through the night. So, and are much more productive doing that and having a massive lion. So consider when you are at your most productive, because that's when you'll get your best work done. And that may well not be during the 9 to 5 standard industrial age working day.
Exactly. I mean, that is the massive point here, is working this way. As Lizzie said, all day has become created equal. I mean, never more so than now. It feels like Groundhog Day at the moment. Every day, you know, is the same. The big thing with remote working is that the opportunity is for asynchronous working. So you don't need to be in the same room at the same time as the people you're working with. Meetings shouldn't really happen in the way that they would have done in an office environment. You can have an ongoing conversation in Slack, for instance, that means that you're much more the master of your own itinerary. And if it helps to balance your life, that you've got children at home, if it helps for you to do a little bit of work 7 days a week, rather than thinking about how do I cram it into Monday to Friday, then I think that's worth considering, particularly as all days are equal right now. So hopefully that blank piece of paper, that blank way of thinking, a new way of thinking about your time spent working, can open up a few opportunities or new thoughts around how you can get through this particular coronavirus pandemic.
Usually we would say, when we're talking about work style, that what doesn't work is a blended work style, as we call it. Now, everyone's different, but usually we would say looking after the kids and working at the same time, for instance, it's very, very hard to get either of those things done well. And actually leads to a lot more stress. Now, at the moment, it's hard for a lot of people to say that and be as black and white about that. But we do think it's worth taking the time to sit down and actually think about work style, potentially at the beginning of each week or one evening a week, so that you're making sure that you've got the headspace to actually make a considered choice about your work style. Because if you don't do the set part, you're certainly not going to be able to project it and respect it. And never more is that more important than now good actions, Alex. And that might involve, so for instance, I've got 3 children now, 2 3-year-olds and a 6-year-old, and we are having film time every day after lunch. So they watch a film after lunch, and that means that I know that I have that time as time to do some work. So I'm not trying to keep them entertained while I'm working. It gives me a bit of headspace. I know that I've got that hour. I wouldn't normally advocate even looking after the kids and working, but needs must at the moment. The 3 of them are at home all the time.
So the having set your work style, as Lizzie's talked about there, projecting it is really, really important. And we touched on it earlier about, you know, the transparency of having a work style and how it can actually benefit communication and benefit working relationships. The second pillar here, so having set your work style, is to project it and be confident in talking about it, because it's only by talking about it that people you're working with can really appreciate what you're going through, why you're working a certain way, and when they can get the best out of you or expect you to deliver on the things that you need to. So sharing and speaking openly and proudly and being unashamed about your work style is really, really important, and a big shift that people need to make under these circumstances.
So we would suggest a few things. Put it on your profile if you're in Slack or Teams. Put it on your email signature if you're in email. Tell your teams about it, the people that you work with immediately. Tell them in terms of not only what you generally think your work style will be, but also where there's going to be flex that week, or if you're trying something new, just be transparent about it and be unapologetic about it as well. Everyone is going through a hard time at the moment, trying to set and uphold their new work styles. So don't be apologetic, be matter of fact about the fact that you're trying a new work style and this is what it's going to be for this week, but that obviously you might be reviewing that and it may be subject to change.
And I think if you've gone on the process of setting your work style against that grid, that blank sheet of paper, you can have a really constructive conversation with the people you're working with and say, look, I've mapped it all out and there just isn't another way at the moment, or this is the best way for me to manage what I've got going on right now. And it looks like this. And that might be that you've got less time and that you need to focus on certain priority areas. Or it might be that you need to work a weekend and things need to delay. But if you've gone on the process of thinking about it and mapping it out, then you can have an open and constructive conversation about it, which will be all the more valued under the current circumstances.
I think this is the point where we need to consider Hoxby lives in a very privileged world where we do judge everyone on their output and everyone can work in their own work style. But there's also a kind of stakeholder management piece here for more traditional organizations that are still in the mentality of a 9-to-5 working day. And this is where I'm starting to talk in work style language in terms of judge me on my output, not where and when I work, know that I'm prioritizing the important things, and just reiterating commitment is important, because the more that more organizations and individuals within organizations can understand that and can create that trust and can judge you on your output, then the more the whole world moves towards a kind of work style mentality, which obviously is hopefully the one silver lining that comes out of this crisis situation. Sharing it also does mean other people can help hold you to account on it. So in terms of the respect stage, the more you've shared it, the more other people can help by saying, hang on a minute, you said you weren't going to work this afternoon. Why are you online, or why are you sending a message? Where you've probably got a bit of work style creep, it's no bad thing to have other people that can kind of help support you in upholding your own work style.
Absolutely. So the respect your work style is as much about you respecting your own work style as it is about you respecting the work style of others. So this is a value that we have at Hoxby, and it has been one of our values since day one. And it's really important that you think about it in both of those senses. So firstly, acknowledge and respect that other people are working to their own work style, and that that's okay, and that you afford them the ability to do that just as they afford you the ability to do it as well. It's a mutual relationship, and that's how it works really well. But equally, you need to show yourself some respect, and don't let work style be the thing that you compromise. It's really, really hard to put yourself first, but there are things that you can do to help with that, to help you stay in control of your work and your work style rather than letting it control you.
So we talk about a few tips here. So turn your notifications off. Keep your status up to date if you're on a shared tool like Slack. We recommend taking your emails and Slacks off your phone, or at least knowing how to toggle them off for when you're not working, because actually a big part of the mental health element of this is not having work in your head when you're not working. So knowing how to toggle off your emails. I know a lot of people that say, well, I'll just leave my emails on, but I'm not really working. You are working as far as your own mental health is concerned at that time. So you need to try and resist the urge to check in the knowledge that you'll be more productive the next time you come back to it within your work style. Another thing we talk about is mesh work styles, by which we mean kind of partnering with people or buddying up with people who have complementary work styles to yours, so that you have a level of stress removed from you because you know that someone else is working at a time when you're not. So, for instance, if you're managing clients, if you can have mesh work styles, then that means that someone else can be answering those clients' urgent questions if you can't because of your work style. The other thing is sometimes there are some good ways to force yourself to respect your own work style. So, as I said, I have 3 children. That's a really good way to respect your work style, because when I'm looking after the 3 kids, there ain't no option to accept a work call or to be working. So there are some things you can put in place, like going out for your ration of once a day exercise, a few things like that, to mean that you naturally have to uphold your work style more.
When push comes to shove, much of what we do isn't life and death. It isn't immediately urgent. I think there is a kind of a sense through synchronous 9-to-5 working. There's a bit of an expectation among workmates that things need to be done right now, and that if you send someone a message, they need to reply right now. I think it's helpful to have a sense of perspective during these times, but also I think in the ability to respect each other's work styles, we do have to release some of the pressure on each other for immediate gratification and immediately answering what needs to be done. It isn't life and death for the most part. So I think we can bear that in mind, then it does help with the kind of universal adoption of work style and enjoyment of work.
And actually, at the moment, for me personally, I'm really enjoying my work, because I'm working, well, I can't tell you my work style because it keeps changing, but at the moment I'm working 4 half days a week and then a couple of hour slots on the other days, and I'm with my children the rest of the time. And I love my children, but it is quite stressful. So actually, I love being able to work. It's something that preserves a bit of me and a bit of the routine during the coronavirus crisis. So when you can have a healthy, happy work style, it also makes you a lot healthier and happier and more fulfilled with your work, and therefore also more productive. So there are benefits to employers and to businesses in doing this way, huge benefits, particularly given the current context.
So I think we're going to start a channel within the Remote Workmates Slack group called Workstyle, which will be a place where we can talk about what our work styles are. We can project our work styles within that channel, having set them. We can help each other respect them if that's helpful. But also we can talk about some of the challenges that we might be facing, particularly during this coronavirus situation, and how they relate to work style and our abilities to work as best we can to our own terms. So we'll do that. Feel free to jump in there and join the chat there.
Essentially, the more transparent you are about it, the more open you are, and the more you share it with other people, the more likely you are to uphold it. So just to recap, set your work style, project your work style, and most importantly, respect your work style are the 3 steps that Alex and I think are most important to being able to work productively and happily during a time like this.
At this point, we're not going to keep talking about work style. We're going to ask if you've got any questions that you want to fire our way about the subject. And if you haven't, that's totally fine.
But it will be a very short session if so.
A short video for anyone tuning in.
So this is the Q&A time. So anyone got any questions at all about work style?
Or a thought? How about a thought? It doesn't have to be a question.
Hello, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Hello, yes you can.
Hello, Ibrahim here, and I just had a quick question, which is about your experience and your advice on kind of setting the schedule and the work style when a lot of things are floating. Say, for example, exercise time, which could be taken pretty much any time, but what's the balance between kind of being flexible around where client demands might be any time, but then never actually getting around to doing the exercise thing or the cleaning thing or whatever it is?
I think that's a really good question, because actually someone was asking me about kind of top tips at a time like this, and one of them I think is trying to get into some semblance of a routine. because I think, as you say, otherwise there are too many moving parts. In fact, way more moving parts in some sense, way more flexibility than normal. And therefore, there's a risk that you end up working all the time and never prioritizing the other things that are really important. So, for instance, having meals at regular times of the day, getting dressed every day, might be one of them, and not just from the waist up, but getting completely dressed. And also taking regular exercise, not only to contribute towards the World 365 Loop Challenge, but also to make sure that you are getting the headspace and getting out of the house. And that might be different times each day, but I think getting into a routine over the course of the 7 days of the week is important, so that, again, it just reduces your decision making as well. You're not having to make constant decisions all day, every day. You are getting into a bit more of a routine. So I think that's a really important point.
I agree. So there's structure. So putting down the things that absolutely can't move and sticking to those. But then there's also there's the psychology of this as well, which is about not overloading yourself with work. So it's very easy to just do more work because there's always more of it. There's a study conducted a few years ago that found that remote workers were 13% more productive than their kind of office counterparts. So if you take that over a 7-day week, that's basically a day, a week of more productivity, or an hour a day over the course of the week. You also aren't commuting every day, and the average commute is about an hour as well. So you've actually got net a couple of hours a day where you can be more selfish about how you spend your time and make sure that you're spending it on something for you, whether that's exercise or cleaning or whatever it might be that isn't work. I think you have to allow yourself the time to do that. So feel comfortable to give yourself the time and the headspace to just go and do that. And I find that rationalizing it against the fact that I'm not commuting, or against the fact that I'm being more productive with the time I am spending working, helps me to just justify it. I think there's a lot of it is just justification to oneself that it's okay to down tools and go for a run or go to the gym or do whatever it is you want to do. And I think that's the most important thing with all of this, and with getting through isolations, it is being comfortable with ourselves, at ease with ourselves and what we're doing. And obviously this is all about well-being this week, and hopefully work style and the way that we think about work and our lives can be a really useful pointer for helping that process of justification.
Morning, everybody. First of all, apologies for my camera not working. Just a comment from me. I left corporate business about 3 years ago, really to do what is on Alex's wall, to do more things that make me happy. Exactly. I find the biggest challenge is to get yourself out of that typical mentality of working that 8-hour day.
Yeah.
What I found really fascinating this morning is this program and this structure to sort of nudge you into this completely different way of thinking. I started my own business, sort of consultancy driven. I have moved back into a very small startup now. So I have all the opportunity to create my own work style. And this morning was just like a complete light bulb moment for me. So thank you very much. I'm going to get my grid out and start working properly. So I'm, the big thing I think for most of us is obviously time, prioritizing it, and I think the way that you have laid it out, I think will be really, really helpful. I find a big challenge is to say no, to set those boundaries and just respect yourself, really, because work can become so self-consuming, and after years of corporate life, you just sort of sit back and you think, is this really what life is about? And the answer is, it's not.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I think so. It's fantastic to hear you talking about it in that way. We obviously will share this summary slide of set, project, and respect. But I think if you so key to adoption or widespread adoption of work style, and for work style to work for you, is understanding what your colleagues understanding it as well. So the kind of the wider acceptance and adoption of work style is ultimately what makes it really work for everyone. So if there are tools or things that you would benefit from having that would enable the people you work with to understand work style or to adopt it or talk about it, then let us know what you think those would be, and we can happily create them and share them within the remote workmates group for kind of hopefully making it easier for everybody beyond the confines of this session.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, I'm quite fortunate. The startup that I'm involved in, I've implemented. It's like I work in the Internet of Things world, so I'm a technologist. So I'm sort of laying the groundwork for you know, a way of work that I would like, and hopefully this can be it. So thank you very much. I will look at the Workstyle Slack channel and definitely take some learning there. Thank you very much.
I think the other thing that's interesting, Anne-Marie, when you say that springs to mind, is that we did some research last year that looked at the relationship between autonomy and happiness. And essentially what we're talking about is having an autonomous work style. And actually what's interesting and what plays to what Ibrahim said just now as well is that we know that autonomy does lead to better happiness, but what our research showed was that the reason it makes you happier is because of your own well-being that comes with that. And so it is so important to not just say, I can work whenever I want, great, that's that sorted, but actually to put structure and thinking around it, and to within that prioritize what works for you, what makes you happy, when are you productive, and how are you prioritizing your own mental health and well-being as part of that, however that may look in terms of your routine, and however many times you may need to change your routine in order to get that right. I think never more so than now, there's this kind of process of elimination, testing and learning, seeing what works in terms of work style. So I think it is, so like you say, leaving the corporate world isn't the answer fully in itself until you overlay this kind of, what is my well-being, what's my work style going to be, and then that's the thing that really unlocks the value in it.
Exactly. True.
Anyone else have any questions, any thoughts?
Yeah, sorry, could I just say something? I found it really helpful because I work for myself and I work with smaller companies, usually creative agencies. So this way of working isn't going to sound odd to them. They're really quite sort of flexible about it and use lots of freelancers. But I think it's really helpful for me because I always feel, I must start work on a Monday morning because I feel guilty if I don't. And now just listening to this, it's like, well, actually, that's probably not the best way to start my week. It would be better to be doing something else on a Monday morning because I'm not really the most productive, but it's guilt that I feel, I must do some client work. So this is really, really helpful. Thank you. I'm going to change my Monday mornings. Well, I have done today, which is good.
Yeah.
There you go. Should we talk about guilt? Because I think that is a really important
one of our favourite subjects here, guilt.
I still feel guilty not working, in an office 9 to 5 like everyone else. That kind of, in a way, that guilt is almost, it's not really guilt, but it's the years of working within the paradigm. The truths that you have in your head are that you have to work this way. This 9 to 5 Monday to Friday that is what you do, and if you dare do anything different to that feels like guilt. It feels like you shouldn't be doing it, when this is the big opportunity for everybody, but we can't escape those natural feelings, and those are the things that we have to try and rationalize in our head and get over. But even after 5 years, occasionally I do still feel guilty.
Even at Hoxby we have that. A couple of people say, I started work late this morning because, and we're like, wait, what is starting work late? What do you mean by that? Because it's not starting work late. It's just flexing your work style, doing something different. And I think in terms of that goes back to well-being and happiness. What is the thing that will mean that you jump out of bed in the morning and that you, by the time you start work, you're really excited to? And so, for instance, pre-coronavirus, my work style was that I dropped the kids at school and then I went swimming 3 days a week. And I only swam for kind of 15 minutes or so. But for me, that was the most productive thinking time of the whole week, was my time in the pool, because there were no interruptions, there was no noise. And to be honest, I'm struggling a bit without my swimming time. I'm running, but I do not like running. But my swimming time was basically my headspace. So my chance to think about what I was going to do rather than just switching on and getting immediately caught up in messages from people and emails. And so I think that that's part of it as well, is knowing what you need to do before you come to work in order to, when I say come to work, I mean walk to wherever you're working at the moment, in order to be really productive and happy and excited when you get there. Because one of the big things that Alex and I have been really helping each other with during this time is staying positive and upbeat and still enjoying what you do. Love what you do is one of our values at Hawksby. We think that if you're passionate about something, you do it a lot better. And being able to create the conditions to feel passionate and excited about what you're doing is really important. And it's important to build that into your work style as well, so that you are enjoying it, and that's contagious, you know, passing that happiness and enjoyment onto other people as well.
There's never been a better time to be kinder to ourselves in our balance of work and life. And if we need to put life before work right now, that's okay. And, you know, if that is the thing that long term we all get from this as the big positive, then that would be wonderful. The fact that we've created an environment whereby we can put life first and do work and enjoy it, but have it fit around what else we've got going on in life.
I also think there's a risk that if we don't put life first and we continue to push ourselves to work, there will be a huge amount of burnout going on. And I think where individuals are talking to their companies and their employers about work style, that for me is the most important thing. If we're to stay productive through the coronavirus crisis, we need to be having conversations about work style in every employer and in every organization, because that is the only way that this will be sustainable. Otherwise, people are going to be burning out very quickly, and we're going to find we're a lot less productive.
Agreed.
I think it's forced the issue, hasn't it, with coronavirus? And as you said, you know, I've been conditioned from growing up that you work all day, every day, 9 to 5. And it's just removing that guilt. And hopefully the next generation won't have that guilt, because they'll be used to people working how they want to work. So I think it's going to change a lot.
Let's hope so.
We think that might be the silver lining. The one silver lining. Maybe this will speed up work style becoming the norm by a generation or two, because suddenly everyone has to have a taster. And if it is for kind of 3 to 6 months, everyone needs to find ways, organizations included, of working productively this way, which requires a new level of understanding and implementation of work style, I think. So fingers crossed. Brilliant.
Any more for any more, or shall we wrap it up?
I think that's it.
Let's wrap it up. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in on a Monday morning of all days.
Alex, all days are created equal, right?
Yeah, I know, but that's brilliant, isn't it? Overcoming the guilt, making a choice. Good on you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and we hope that it's been useful.
We'll be sharing this as a video as well, so you can share it with anyone who you think might be interested, who wasn't able to join. And we will also be creating that work style channel. So do have a think about what your work style is and share it in there, and we'll all support each other in respecting it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.